Thank you very much, Arthur. Arthur has been a great supporter of my blockchain initiative from the very start. My first presentation was in Moscow at MINEX, and since then I've attended several MINEX events with my presentations. It's the first time that I have actually a panel on blockchain, and I've been running webinars on blockchain for a while, and some of the speakers I hear now in person, and I haven't seen them before. It's the first time because it happened to be all through the pandemic. So a short introduction from me about blockchain. Why are we talking about that? So since I've been here in the morning, since morning, I was writing down some of the words that were pronounced, and I thought that they actually summarize what this blockchain technology does. At the very first panel with Jane on ESG, one word was pronounced was a backbone. Well, blockchain is a backbone technology. Another word was powerful. Blockchain is very powerful. Credible data, that's what blockchain assures. Transparency, one of the qualities of blockchain. And finally, from Jamie Strauss, he said, come together. That's what blockchain does. It brings different companies together in the ways that we've never experienced before. It is a revolutionary technology. We'll talk a little bit about the technology today, and also, of course, how it impacts mining, but I will start by giving an opportunity to all our panelists to introduce themselves. I will start with myself. I am a geologist, like Arthur already mentioned. My experience was mainly in the mineral exploration, and in the mineral exploration, I worked a lot with data. So I learned to respect a good data management practice, a good database, and not Excel spreadsheet. And when I learned about the big data and analysis of big data, and later about the blockchain technology and how it transforms our interaction with data, I realized that this is the next step. And then I decided to start my own consultancy, which is called Kamni Chain. Kamni is rocks in Russian. So it's a rock chain. And my focus is to help mining companies take advantage of blockchain technology in whatever area where blockchain can help. And of course, we will be talking about that today. Now blockchain is very much kind of in the news to collect and preserve and share the data on ESG in mining. So that was kind of a transition. We will talk about that, how blockchain technology implementation mining has changed, but my focus of my consultancy is to help a variety of mining companies learn about blockchain and adopt it. For that purpose, I'm organizing monthly webinars on blockchain and mining. The information can be found, everything is recorded, available for free. It's an educational tool, it's not a commercial tool. My website is blockchainandmining.com. You can find all our presentations there, and some of the people who are here today have presented, and you can find their presentations online on this website. So I will now give opportunity to our panel to present themselves. I guess I'll just pick and choose. We have 4 people in person, and we have 3 people online. We have a very wide geography. We have Michelle Ash in Australia, and Olga Ilina in Moscow, and Nathan Williams in Berlin. So I guess we'll start. Let's start as the sun goes. Let's start from Australia. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself, and why are you, talking about blockchain on the blockchain session?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my name's Michelle Ash. I've worked now in the mining industry for about 30 years, both in operational roles. I'm actually a civil engineer who became a mining engineer. And so I've held roles in mines, as well as being the general manager of mines, and more recently chief operating officer. And then I've also held strategic roles. So whether that's head of strategy or chief innovation officer, which I was for Barrick most recently, and then now I'm CEO of Dassault Systems Geovia business, which is very mining and construction focused. And the reason that I'm talking here on this panel, so blockchain has been an interest of mine in mining for around about 6 or 7 years now. Certainly heightened when I was Chief Innovation Officer for Barrick, where we had a number of projects around traceability, smart contracts, and also representation of value. So looking at how we could use blockchain to represent gold, or to think about how gold transactions occurred. And then, that's carried on into my current role. We get asked a lot of questions, both from governments as well as mining companies, around especially traceability and how you can link ESG metrics to minerals, how you can show especially how those minerals travel through the supply chain and ecosystem, and more recently, quite a bit of interest around smart contracts. So that's a bit about me.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you for mentioning smart contracts. We really have to talk about that as well. But as the sun goes, Olga is next. Please, Olga, introduce yourself and tell us about your work and about your connection to blockchain.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this event. So I'm Olga Ilina. Now I'm head of expert group in a blockchain center of competence based in Moscow, and previously I was blockchain offering leader for Central and Eastern Europe in IBM. So regarding our center of competence, as I mentioned before, we are based in Moscow. So right now it is a research center that develops blockchain expertise through interaction with the international expert and scientific community. So we're developing platforms and solutions to support blockchain projects, and we are basic organization for the first blockchain master degree program in Russia. And as well, we pay great attention to open source community support, and we continually contribute to Hyperledger Fabric project. So I joined this center of competence this year, and it's quite challenging. And so mining plays a really great and essential role right now in my life. And if we're speaking about my previous expertise in IBM, it was cross-industry blockchain expertise, but of course it's included mining as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Nathan, up next.
Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Nathan Williams, founder and CEO of MineSpider. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. And what we've done is we've built a blockchain, a public blockchain for creating digital materials passports. So if you know anything about blockchains, there's differences between how you actually construct the blockchains. So we built our own. And we got started back in 2017. We conducted some traceability pilot projects with Google, tracking tin out of Minsk in South America end to end, also with Volkswagen. And we learned a lot about how companies need to interact with traceability and with blockchain, what's important to companies. And as a result, we've grown a little bit. We now have a couple of different blockchain offerings and products that we do. So we do traceability as a service, mapping out supply chains. We have a chain of custody tool, and we have a product passport tool and a battery passport tool to track carbon emissions and to help materials cross borders, to help recycling. And it's been an amazing journey. And the more you dig into it, the more use cases that you see.
Yeah, I've met MineSpider at the very beginning of my blockchain journey, and it's just exciting to see the development and how the expansion. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, and I think we'll start on Anna, and then thank you. I don't know which way is east here, but
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm a founder of Smartphone Tech. So I've been actually working with some of their companies here. I've been in the blockchain journey since 2016, when we were looking back at their pharmaceutical supply chain, traceability and transparency aspects, digitizing physically end-to-end whole pharmaceutical supply chain for one of the governments. and the private sectors. And then I moved into the oil and gas, which was not my core domain. So I moved quickly into the natural resources, and I started with actually water, which led me into the mining later on. And after 5 years exploring water governance and water management, I actually ended up in the mining space, which which now I'm looking. I actually was on the downstream with one of the companies on the panel here. Was my first insights, but I actually moved now into upstream, and we're looking into the impact assessment, impact management, and impact from the impact investment perspective. So we are both looking at the project development and project finance.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Heike Troll, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for MineHub Technologies. Now, my background is I spent a bit more than a decade directly in mining with Anglo American as the group head of strategy, and also on the leadership team of the marketing trading business, where I set up the digital team. And that's the first time I came across blockchain. Now, and the reason I'm here is because of MineHub Technologies. So I've joined them on the advisory board, and recently as the Chief Commercial Officer. And MineHub really is an integrated enterprise blockchain-based platform that's after, you said the words, efficiency, security, transparency, and then also connectivity. And it is very much post-trade, or as Anna called it, downstream within the mining company. And it really does that by connecting parties to commodity transactions, buyers, sellers, financiers, to enable them on an easy solution to exchange documents real time, and enable that all stages of the mining value chain post-trade, data is being shared and documents are being seen. So it's a bit like a industry-wide ERP solution rather than within companies, but going across companies and across borders as well. And then really what it does, it frees up information that's normally in WhatsApp groups, in paper channels, on emails, or in people's heads, and then enabling the companies to focus on more value-adding processes. So MineHub's been developed with industry, for industry. So small mining companies, big mining companies have contributed. Some of that's been in the news. We're still a startup, but listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Johan, and I'm the business lead for ESG and also product initiatives at Open Mineral. Company is developing a spot market for concentrate product, really from mine to smelter. And my entire energy now is on data analysis for optimizing economic value on any trade of concentrate across the entire mining value chain against a set of ESG metrics. So that's basically what we're developing. And we're not trying to revolutionize or completely change how the industry works. We're really trying to create the tools that actually optimizes how the industry works at the moment. And just a little bit about my background quickly. I started off working as a geological engineer in Africa, and then went to China to develop software products over there, starting 2 companies before coming back here to work with Open Mineral.
Yeah, and I'm aware you've had 7 introductions or 6 ones now, so I'll try and keep it short. So Hugo Brody, Vice President for Sustainability at the London Metal Exchange. We're the world's largest markets for base metals futures. So what do? We set the price for copper, aluminium, tin, zinc, cobalt, and nickel. We allow people to hedge against volatile pricing conditions on the exchange. So we've certainly seen some volatile prices this year. And maybe why I'm here today is because we also are a market of last resort, meaning you can actually take delivery of LME grade metal from one of our 400 or so licensed warehouses around the world. So we set the metallurgical and chemical composition of those metals. And this year is the first time we're setting ethical requirements for those metals. So really in the blockchain space, we're avid watchers. We're trying to encourage all of our brands to start disclosing sustainability information. And I'd be interested to see how these companies on the panel or the experts we have today can maybe solve some of the issues that we see in blockchain and hear about some of the good work they're doing as well.
Excellent. So here are long introductions. Yes, so we have a lot of people, but that's because it's such a great technology and everybody wants to do it. We will not be getting too technical here. It is not a simple technology, but it's not too complex in actual implementation. but there are certain unique qualities of this technology that make it revolutionary, that make it different. And I would like to ask those members of our panel who actually worked for the industry, what qualities of this technology particularly attracted your attention? And let's start again in Australia. Michelle, can you please tell us a little bit about that? How did you get excited about it? What was it? What was it in it for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, there's a number of qualities of blockchain that make it, I think, a really useful tool that can solve a number of different use cases. If we start with a number of the words that people have used already, so its ability to create transparency throughout a value chain, I think is the one thing that certainly is interesting to governments and to mining companies that want to be able to immutably, so another quality that's important, demonstrate the ESG metrics or the value of their products. And, I think that's certainly where governments like Canadian government and the Australian government recently I've had conversations with where, they're very interested in being able to demonstrate all the way down to potentially customers, but certainly to those building products for customers, how good their ores are, how much contribution is created in the community, how environmentally I was going to say impactful, but lack of impact on the environment, I guess, or how environmentally well they are mined. More and more, interestingly enough, especially with carbon tracing and wanting to be able to, assign carbon credentials or carbon usage to these minerals, and again, transparently, immutably. I think if we go to some of the other use cases, though, other great things about blockchain is around smart contracts, and some of the use cases around being able to it instantaneously isn't quite the right word, but with very limited effort, assign certain metrics to a contract, and when those metrics are met, the contract conditions then get carried out. And I think that's really important, especially for quite complex contracts where there could be quite long delays between delivery of that contract and payment, or even for relatively simple contracts where the terms and conditions are relatively straightforward, and you really don't want all of the bother of people, various levels in the organisation, and therefore the cost actually working on and transacting. And I think the ability for that to happen and create trust between two parties where trust may not exist without the facilitation of blockchain. So I think they're the sorts of qualities that I find really interesting, and I think lead to some of these really interesting use cases. I do think one of the interesting aspects of blockchain for me, though, is that it does start breaking down the barriers of the corporation. So in creating this transparency and creating this immutability, some of the things that we think about in terms of corporations and its sanctity start breaking down. And I think that's one of the areas where we need to think about, because I think blockchain can be both a continuous improvement tool where you're sort of doing the same thing, but just more efficiently and effectively using blockchain. Or, and I guess this is the way I tend to lean because I tend to be more transformative, we can radically change the way we do things because you don't need all of the parties that are there just to create trust, or you don't need to have some of these artificial barriers that we've created either because of, the way data moves, or the way trust is built, or the way the way we've thought about the world historically. And I think gets really interesting, because it does get to the fundamental of corporations, and what corporations are about.
I also like radical change, Michelle. I guess that's the me who likes the revolution, because a lot of people compare the beginning where blockchain is now. It's like the very beginning of the internet when it was just emails, and who knew that it will end up in this, the conference online and other things. But I would also like to give the word to Heike here, because you also work in the industry. When did blockchain first kind of caught your attention? Why?
Sure, no, absolutely. I'm going to quote some statistics, because we all know that metals and mining powers the world economy, even though it may have not have been included in COP26, but it's a hugely important industry. $1.8 trillion actually of materials and minerals move across the planet, supplying industries using our everyday products. But you all know that, so I didn't need to dwell on that. But what's interesting that is this whole journey is basically costly, time-consuming. I think a container from Africa to Europe takes 30 days, 200 interactions, thousands of people, etc. And it's estimated that 30% of this time is actually wasted. And that's globally worth 150 billion. It's lost on a global scale because of multi-party access and paper-based processes. And that kind of speaks for itself, that number. So if that's the opportunity to save, to take paper out, that's a huge number, actually. And I think coming to why blockchain, what MineHub tries to do is basically take this complexity out, digitize it, make it easier, streamline it. And blockchain just ensures the integrity of the information that's behind that, basically.
So you already mentioned the word easy, and Michelle kind of also mentioned that as well. Maybe Olga, can you say in your experience, was it difficult to implement your blockchain-based project? Did it make life easier for those who were working with the technology?
Yeah, but first of all, let me comment regarding, the benefits of this technology, why we decide to take the opportunity to use blockchain. So transparency plays a really essential role for our ecosystem of companies. I mean, not only our research center. So for our mining company, it's important to demonstrate two things. So first of all, it is all about responsible sourcing. Really important for us to prove that the metal was mined ethically, it fits all the ecological requirements and so on. It's really important to provide the best open information for our final customers. And the second thing, that the platform for digitization of physical assets can provide for its final users as possible. So it is our second case, and it's really, really important to show that you can trust this platform, that you can buy assets, you can sell assets and so on, and you can really trust this platform, and it's important for us. Yeah.
Thank you. I just would like to highlight here that it's still the technology is of course developing very fast. It was before only used for cryptocurrencies, and for the longest time I had to tell I'm only interested in blockchain, not in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a blockchain, but blockchain is not just Bitcoin. And I would like to give a word here to Nathan. And can you tell us, in your years of experience, not that many years, from 2017, how do you see the progress of the technology as it applies in the mining industry? I have to unmute.
I think something that we need to keep in mind is what blockchain is exactly. Because we talk about it, it's secure, its benefits, it secures everything. At its core, all blockchain is a way of creating unique digital items. And if we demystify this a little bit, like it's complex how it's built and it's complex how it works. But if you think about a digital item, you think of a sound file, a movie file that you can copy 18 bazillion times. But with blockchain, you can know which one is the original and which ones are the copies. That's really all it is. And there are ways that you can do it, and you can do that without having a trusted party. There's no central authority that needs to be there to verify that this is the original and everything else is a fake. With a digital item, it can store value if it is unique. So if you've got 1 Bitcoin, it can store financial value, and you can print your own money and make it have use. And if people buy it, then there's money. You can also use it for other things, such as creating digital certificates or digital passports. And sort of like if you had a paper passport that would have anti-counterfeiting or anti-duplication technology in it, like a holograph strip or something like that. With blockchain, it's essentially a way of making those uncounterable, unchangeable, unduplicatable certificates or items. But because they're digital, you can split it in a million pieces. You can track everybody who ever held it. And so there's a lot of benefits to this. And you can also start doing things like facilitating trade. It's like you can use digital cash and things like that. I remember when I got started with blockchain that my first reaction to it is I thought it was just a way to buy drugs on the internet. And what we're seeing in the development since 2017 is that, first of all, blockchain is becoming more hidden. And that's normal. That's the way it should be. Blockchain, people shouldn't have to have a degree in computer science to be able to get the benefits out of it, right? And it's the same thing with the way the internet developed. Back in 1995, you really had to know what you were doing to even send an email or to go to a web page. Now it's very easy to get started making your own web pages, that sort of thing. That as people got excited, there were bubbles of investment and there were scams, but at the same time, more people went into it. They developed tools, they made it easier to use. Same thing happened with cryptocurrencies. People went into it. There were scams, there were good projects, but as more people went into it, it made it easier to use. And now when a blockchain project comes along, people are more thinking, how can I find a real business case for this? How can I be creative in how we start to generate value or give value to our customers? And so the basics of it are sort of what people talk about now. The real base way of dealing with blockchain in supply chain and in mining is provenance. Where does my material come from? Or from the miner's point of view, how can I communicate to my customers that I am doing good work, that I don't have a commodity, I have a trusted product. I've got low carbon emissions. I've got fairly paid workers, things like that. As we progress, we're going to get into more and more exotic uses of this type of technology, like Michelle was talking about just a moment ago. You know, the example I love that Michelle used to say all the time back in the early days, and it's inspired me in my early days, was, what do we do with gold? A lot of it we dig up, we make shiny, and we put it back underground and store it. Why don't we just keep it there and then trade a token that represents it? You know, would that be more ecologically sound? So there are all sorts of exciting, exotic things that we can do with this type of technology that has unduplicatable nature and has a way of preventing fraud, because you know which items are unique and which ones are duplicates or fakes. But I still think we're right at the tip of the iceberg. We're at a point now where blockchain means, hey, it's a cool technology and I can trust it, and it's a way that I can become more transparent and connect with my customers, connect with my suppliers, maybe get better funding or better respect. And I think that that's a natural, normal way that this industry needs to progress.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. I would like actually to put it out to the panel. We heard a lot about ESG today, and just previous panel was about, ESG focused finance. What is your experience? What is your thinking? Will blockchain technology help assure getting this finance? I don't know who wants to talk first about that? Maybe Hugo, do you have?
Yeah, so I can give the LME perspective. So I guess we see a lot of these blockchain pilots from our producers. A lot of them are really advanced, and a lot of them are obviously really doing good work. But I think the thing I'm trying to get my head around, and maybe the panel can answer, is how you solve that first input issue. So how do you, let's say it's traceability, how do you have the technology at the mine where the inputter of that data is putting in correct and accurate information? And if that information is accurate, then sure, that's great. The information transfers through the chain. So, and I guess the other caveat to that question is, how do you make sure that how do you make sure the person who's inputting that data has the access to the technology, that they can actually adequately put in the information, that there's a check on what's being put in. And I suppose secondary to that, the ESG information tracking is fantastic, but what's the methodology behind this emissions data that you're using, and is it consistent and comparable to the blockchain system that's over there using different people? So maybe that's a giant question I've thrown to my panelists, but I'd really like to hear the answer.
That's Johan, the question you kind of asked when we were talking there is like, okay, we know that with a regular database, garbage in, garbage out. With a blockchain, it's garbage in, garbage forever. But I think that's exactly the exciting part, because you are responsible and everybody will know that you put it in there and it will be forever known. Yeah, I don't know, Michelle, do you want to comment on that? How do we make sure that what goes in is, traceable and reliable?
Yeah, so look, absolutely. So I think there's many different ways. So there are certainly ways that we can link the blockchain to automated data. So, it doesn't have human error, it doesn't have human manipulation, etc. And especially now with the relative cheapness as well as explosion of optionality around communication systems, IoT devices, sensor technology, etc. So there are many things that we can detect relatively autonomously, and certainly when it comes to laboratory data and things like that. So Origin, one of the interesting things we found when we were looking at using blockchain for gold traceability, and some of the more interesting options around store of value and how you can link value to and use blockchain to trade that value, is that each mineral that we extract often has its own chemical composition that is unique to that area of extraction. So, you can certainly, use some of those techniques to then say, this definitely was extracted at this point. So there's certainly some ways to do that. The other thing that we explored a lot was, how do you create systems where it is more advantageous for people to put in the correct data than put in incorrect data. So again, how you set up these systems, I think, is fundamentally important, and you want to drive people towards truth and therefore trustworthiness, and to actually give some benefit to people for that. And again, one of the great things with blockchain is it's very much more efficient, especially when you've got a lot of people involved, to identify who it is that's putting that information in or contributing that information, and then you can relatively easily distribute, or certainly more easily than without a blockchain, distribute value to that person that is putting that information in. So I think there's a lot of ways we can gamify some of these things so that it is much more advantageous to be truthful than otherwise. And so I think for me, it's those two things that become very important. And then, of course, there's also some physical things that we need to do to, ensure chain of custody, which, often are actually involved in the mining industry anyway, because often we don't want to lose some of our precious commodities along the way. Gold being quite an obvious one, but interestingly enough, having worked in a number of countries around the world, even things like copper, and especially as the price starts going up, even at sometimes pig iron. And I know even London lost some of its manhole covers at some point because the cost of iron was higher than it normally was, and so people were redistributing the manhole covers. But so there's also ways you can link chain of value. In some parts of the industry, there's also interesting ways of proving authenticity, at the end. So, one of the interesting things we found with gold is that when you create gold bars, the cooling process actually creates an individual fingerprint, if you want. So no two gold bars cool the same, and therefore the patterns on those gold bars are unique. And so again, you can use these sorts of techniques. So there's all sorts of different techniques that you can use, but effectively what you're trying to do is automate information and gamify the process and the workflows so that it drives people towards honesty and trust.
Yeah, certainly blockchain, of course, is a part of digitization journey, including this Internet of Things devices, all kinds of measuring devices. Yes, Nathan, you want to say something? Please go ahead.
One thing that is also really good to keep in mind is that this is always going to be an arms race. We don't want to go into a new technology that has the potential to really help get better information to the downstream and going, oh, well, it's not perfect yet. Because one of the things that we see is that there are different risks at different stages in the supply chain, and it's good to protect against the risks we are most in danger of falling into. So for example, if you've got material coming from Australia, you might not need to collect the same data that you would about child labor, for instance, because it's not as big of an issue there because you've got other institutions around you just by nature of the geography. And the thing is, what we see in our live scenarios is that often when you're at a smelter level, for example, you will want to use the blockchain to create passports to make it easier for people to see your documents so you can export. You're already collecting the data. The question is, do you trust the data as you collected already? If not, then the blockchain won't really help you. It's true. You can't just replace all of these systems that have already been in place overnight. But what you can do is you can make it easier to see the data that you need. And often someone's got to buy this stuff. And so if we're expecting that the purchaser therefore is sort of absolved of responsibility, that they don't have to do any due diligence, I think that's sort of the wrong attitude. I think that what it is we want to get better data so that the purchaser has an easier time making a decision of who they trust and who they buy from. I think we often talk about trustlessness with blockchain, but maybe reducing the costs and the difficulty of trust is a better way of thinking about supply chain applications. The other thing that we can do with this blockchain in order to ensure responsibility is just change who needs to be involved, because in a weird way, a chain of custody from, say, mine to smelter, that's very common in something in places like Africa where you would need this, especially with artisanal situations. And this is normally conducted by a third party. Why? Because then it gives defensibility. Hey, someone else checked it out. But it could just as easily be a buyer, that conducts their own due diligence on the mines they buy from, and then has a chain of custody from the mines they buy from. The question is, do you trust the person who conducted the due diligence? A third party can be bribed. A smelter can be, corrupt. And so we need to always think about what data would help us, because if it wouldn't help us without a blockchain, it certainly wouldn't help us with a blockchain.
Okay, I'm a bit conscious of time here. There are certain topics that I really want to cover during this panel, and obviously our panel is already very geographically diverse, but there is certain connection between the blockchain technology and the legislation in different countries and how it can be applied. And I know that a lot of companies struggle with the legality of their operations, and specifically since we have Olga with us here. Olga, can you comment on your experience? What does it mean to work in blockchain space in Russia? How, is it compared to other countries, is it more difficult? Does it matter?
Yeah, sure. So from my personal experience, of course, we're meeting some legal restrictions right now in Russia. So, for example, it's still very difficult to implement some, systems that need to be certified by government. I mean, and of course, it somehow stops the development of really great initiatives in blockchain. But on the other hand, it's not a problem at all to implement some commercial platforms and projects. So, for example, we have some really great examples of using such platforms in aviation or in banks, and it's not a problem right now to implement it. But if you're going to implement some government-related systems or systems that required some official certifications, of course, you will meet some, some problems with this. But we're actively working on this, as far as I know, and we are working on changing the legal base for this, and hopefully soon it will be not a problem at all for us, because the world is changing and we're open as well for these changes. Why not? And regarding other countries, I can speak about Kazakhstan and Ukraine and Azerbaijan. I think they are very, open for these changes as well. So I can see really great initiatives in these countries, and they are changing their legal base as well. And I'm really happy to see these changes, because, it's very important for us to be, with all other worlds, and we are successful with this, I think.
Thank you. And now I want to have a discussion, please, between Heike and Johan here, because you both have experience in China. And how does that work in China with the various software products and blockchain? And does it work at all?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to discuss this question without getting too political, but I think the best way to come across it is from the angle of data privacy. I think that's an important thing, especially in blockchain, because over here in the West, we have this basically permissionless. The data is quite open, and we can actually run nodes which actually verify transactions across the blockchain. But in China, it's a little bit different. It's actually permissions. Okay, so when it's permissioned, it means that nobody can actually run a public node in China, because it's about how the data is actually managed over there. It's not like one is better than the other, or one is right and one is wrong. It's just a different way of doing things. But actually what they're actually building up in China at the moment is called a BSN. It's called a blockchain service network. This is a really interesting initiative, because China, I know people, when they think of China, blockchain in China, they're thinking, oh yeah, but China banned cryptocurrencies. It doesn't like blockchain. Actually, we need to think of it, blockchain is actually just, cryptocurrency is just an application built on top of the blockchain. Actually, the government is very, very hard on developing the blockchain. And not only that, but actually developing the infrastructure for it. So with the BSN, which they're developing, actually they're trying to create a new protocol. This protocol, so instead of internet, we have the HTTP, which is, it's like one server to another server, and that's how they communicate. But in blockchain, it's a bit like a broadcast that we have now. So we have different people on Zoom at the moment, and then we're all communicating at once. That's basically the blockchain. And what the BSN is trying to do is creating the infrastructure to make that much more efficient. So it's a new protocol they're creating. And by doing that, what actually you're doing is you're increasing efficiency, which actually decreases the cost. And if you can decrease the cost, you can allow more people to build on top of the blockchain, which makes it much cheaper. So when you have it much cheaper, that's how you basically get a network effect of a growing economy. And actually, we're seeing that now with the BSN and this new infrastructure the Chinese are building. And the internet has like two relays, one that's working in China and one that's working outside of China. So for any chain that goes onto the BSN, if it's Ethereum or Algorand or any one of these other big chains, it kind of goes into a different animal when it gets into China itself. But I would say to anyone that's actually developing these chains, developing on top of a blockchain, is to make sure that it's compliant with the BSN. And we know it's growing, because now we've just seen in the FSU in Uzbekistan, they've just created a portal to access the BSN. And this is really, really big, because then it allows any developer to perhaps develop blockchain associated applications called dApps for as little as $100 or $200. This is really, really game changing. And I think this network effect is going to grow even more. So when we're looking at regulation and things like that, I think that the takeaways is that in China, it's very much still permission. So data is very much controlled, but then over here it's permissionless. So it's very much open. So I think when we're developing applications to do data transfer from mine to smelter or ESG data, is to look at what's being standardized and then comply with that data. But if you're actually building a blockchain, I think it's important to see what the BSN is doing, and that way you can actually access the largest market for metals and mining in the world, which is China.
Brilliant. I didn't know that. I learned something.
Fantastic. I'm glad you went first. But maybe just to add on to that. So for MineHub, China is a really important market and a really growing market. And also, and it was in the press last year that one of the first trials was actually with BHP and Bauer Steel. So we have a growing presence there. We have people on the ground, and we need to comply with exactly what you were talking about. It's important that the data is stored in China. So the data is stored in China. We're complying with all data and cybersecurity laws, and have a land bridge through the Great Firewall, which of course is incredibly important, just in case and costly as well, just in case the wall goes up, the data then can still come through. It's important that it's a growing market, and we're putting quite a lot of effort into that. Very aware of the point you made around how fast and cheap it can become, and this competition is strong. And of course, we are also looking at partnering up or having conversations in order to see what's actually being done inside. But it's a very key market.
Excellent. So we've covered geography. I think we somewhat covered, the stretch of blockchain from, exploration data. We didn't talk so much about trade. So I don't know if somebody wants to comment on metals trade and importance of blockchain for that. If he wants to say, no. Okay. One topic I do want to talk about is in terms of who is using blockchain in mining, in terms of from the big companies to the medium and small companies. Can you please, express your experience, your opinions on that? I have mine, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about that.
Yep, I can go from the LME's brands that I know of. So in the region, I think Nornickel and Rusal have quite advanced projects, and I was very interested to hear about how cheap it could be to develop this type of platform, because the LME, we have 500 or so brands globally, and they vary in sophistication. You've got your Rusals and your Nornickel have giant teams who can develop this technology. And then maybe within Zinc in Italy, you've got a much smaller company that's just started, and if you say blockchain to them, they'll immediately hang up the phone and won't talk to you again. So I think the messaging, which I certainly didn't know about how easy it is to get started and how cheap it can be, I think that would be good to get it out there and get out some of the uses, because I think currently, from my perspective, when you mention blockchain to certain producers, their eyes kind of glaze over and they don't see the uses. So it's not just for the most sophisticated, giant integrated mining companies, but perhaps it's also for the mid-cap and the smaller level mines as well, or smelters, I should say, at the LME. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the stakeholder management, which is a governance piece which includes environmental and social. So I wouldn't be talking about the companies, but there's a Canadian government which recently deployed the initiative, and where they're collecting their impact data. It's initially around the environmental impact, and then quantifying and then assigning value. But then, of course, they will be attaching as well social impact as well. And that piece is very important, even though that's going into downstream and will be plugged into companies like MineSpider, for instance, and MineHub and others. This is very important for investors, and it's not just about investor relationship, but it's also stakeholder relationship, which that data is important, is very important to be translated into their specific types of their understanding of cultural, I would say, cultural/social political context. And this is what we are looking at. So, for instance, certain mining companies are considering how to diversify their business models and become not just a mining company, but so, for instance, carbon offset companies or decarbonize their activities. And that is important to verify and put into their shared ledger of information, which will be shared not just with the downstream companies, smelters and refineries and end consumers, customers, but also with the upstream, be it insurance companies, be it investors, be it funds, private equities, and this is what we're looking at specifically as well. And that is very important as well from the community's perspective, because communities are left behind, but they're not left behind in terms of their risk perspective. So risk perspective means that social license to operate is number one risk for the number of years. And this is where environmental and social aspects are quite important and must be translated and shared not just with their downstream, but also with their local governments and regional governments and national governments. And that has to be all the way actually streamlined to their NDCs and NAPs, National Adaptation Plans, and climate change plans related to the government and fiduciary duties of investors.
What was this initiative in British Columbia?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard about it. I was very excited about it because it's the first actually government initiative in mining, for ESG tracking. So I was very excited because I always thought British Columbia is the jurisdiction that is the most prepared really for implementation of blockchain, because they are very, very digitized, as Nathan knows, as he stems from there. Yeah, so no, I was very excited about that, to see the government. And another thing too, I think Olga commented on that the lack of knowledge. We need education in the technology. And in British Columbia, they also have a BRIM institute that actually is focusing on blockchain technology, specifically in mining. And I think Nornickel, together with IBM, had an initiative where they educated specifically for blockchain technology in mining industry. So we're drawing to a close here, and I just want to give everybody an opportunity to express their hope for the blockchain technology. Because it's a very fast developing technology. In the next year, where do you want to be? Let's again start from Michelle, and then we'll go in the same order again. Where do you want to be in the next year?
Yeah, so look, I mean, for me, it's two areas. One I think is, and it sort of relates to that last question. I think there's three reasons why it's only the larger miners that are looking at various blockchain options, and some of the more advanced governments, Canada well ahead, and Australia, as well as a few others. And I think that's around cost, and those costs are coming down dramatically. It's already knocked at least 1 0 off since I started in 2017 looking at blockchain, maybe up to 2 almost. But I think the other one is valuable use cases. And I think for me, this is really important, which is, trying to, rather than as an industry have a bit of a scatter with some of the use cases, let's really double down on some use cases that are going to be, transversely valuable, and whether that is around traceability, whether it's around a specific smart contract. I know there's been some shipping ones that have been quite successful, as well as some drilling ones have been quite successful. And then, I think this issue around store of value, which is, as Nathan said, to the heart of my passion with blockchain, is the fact that, it can be used to store value, to transact and interact value. And so, one of the things I would really like to see, and to plug leaving gold in the ground again, is to start thinking about some of these really exciting different options with blockchain, and how we can create value, both environmental value as well as community value, but still continue to add value to the world as mining companies do.
Okay.
Yeah, so from my personal feeling, of course, I'm very optimistic regarding future of blockchain all over the world and in Russia. But I believe that we had to pay great attention regarding successful implementation cases. It's really important to show not only, in words that blockchain can really help us but it's really, really important to show that it's real. It's just, about like, some other business tool that can help, technology that can help to work with your data and so on. So it's not something exotic or hype or something like this. So I believe in it.
Thank you, Olga. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. So that's the water on my mill. Can Nathan dream away?
Well, of course, I'll be on my Lamborghini sitting on the yacht and the folks in the swimming pool of a bigger yacht. No, but I think that what we're seeing now is a move away from proofs of concept being proof of concept that the technology works. We know the technology works. Now it's about business case and proof that that people can get value out of this. And I think that what I would like to see in the next year, next 2 years, is a move away from a need to have giant consortia that all agree beforehand to share data before they can even get started thinking about a blockchain project, and move toward a much simpler model of, hey, I want a QR code that goes on my metal that shows where it comes from, under what conditions it's been produced. People scan it, beep, now they got the documents, now they got the CO2 emissions, now we can link it together, and to demystify this a little bit. And I think that that's where we're going with 2022.
Excellent. Okay, and Anna, I think going in that direction.
Well, in my case, I see blockchain as an infrastructure, data infrastructure aspects. And since I moved into the physical infrastructure, I see building ecosystems around that, where we will see a new type of emerging ecosystems, which will create more positive impact around mining and truly greenify the mining and metals industry, and make and transform them, not just from the perspective of digitalization, but also transform them from the perspective where they can become utility or infrastructure companies or green energy production. And we can see some great examples presented at COP26 actually, launched. And we are truly, truly passionate about that. And as we say, the time is now, and we wait for no one.
So I think what I would like to see is that people don't roll their eyes when someone says blockchain, but that because they fully understand it and see the value cases and starting to see the value creation, and that we're starting to chip away at that, the big numbers I mentioned earlier around wastage lost in the industry.
Yeah, I hope it can bring transparency and actually do the marketing and PR for the mining industry itself, because I think they can do that, and it actually opens up the doorway to more lines of like bank lines of credit associated with green bonds, and the conversation we had just before us. I think that'd be really game changing. That's what we really need if we really want to get the materials needed for the green revolution going forward, which is absolutely paramount if we want to get a development project into operation. And I think that blockchain might have an advantage to help us doing that. So I'm just hoping there'll be more transparency in that area, and I think that's what blockchain can deliver.
Yeah, so lastly, not to echo Michelle too much, but obviously at the LME, we're not in gold, we're in aluminium, copper, lead, zinc, nickel, and tin. So it'd be great to see more pilots, more use cases and practical examples in those specific metal categories from my perspective. And I suppose in a few years or maybe in a month's time, brands coming to the LME and saying, we'd like to voluntarily disclose through your platform that we have this sustainability characteristics and it's powered or underpinned by blockchain technology. And I think that would be a nice tangible example in the near term to show. Yeah.
Well, and since I'm the moderator here, I'm going to have two dreams to myself. And the dream number one is that the focus of the blockchain implementation, that the mining companies finally start seeing that they can do it to their advantage rather than to advantage of the client. So this is what I'm working on. I'm hoping that people will open their eyes and see that they can start implementing it and actually benefit from that. This is dream number one. And dream number two is that next MINEX Eurasia happens with Nathan on his yacht, yeah? We're all coming, he's all inviting us.
Perfect.
That's it, yeah. Okay, well, I think we're good on time. Okay, I think Arthur agrees to be on a yacht with Nathan. So thank you to all who stayed.